Hello, my friends. It's Tuesday, December 30th, and I'm your host, Radical Russ Belville, your Red State refugee. And welcome to the Radical Russ Show, your weekday morning wake and bake, coming to you from Rolla J Studios in Southern Oregon. On today's smoke session, let's talk about how the DOJ keeps slow-walking the Epstein files release, how artists are boycotting the Trump Kennedy Center, and a reader corrects me on presidential history. But before we get to all the serious political stuff, we've got time for 3 quick hits. Thank you so much to everyone out there who has helped out and donated on the GoFundMe for my step-granddaughter, Inez, and her partner, Vinny. If you missed the podcast, if you missed the news, over the Christmas holiday, my 21-year-old step-granddaughter, who's already a mother of 2, a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old, she was pregnant with, 5 months pregnant with her soon-to-be daughter, Lila Lynn, when she got into a car accident, heavy rainstorm on US 395 between Susanville and Reno, and she crashed into a tree. She hydroplaned and crashed into a tree at 65 miles an hour. She was immediately taken by ambulance to the hospital, Banner Lassen Hospital, where she was treated and released within an hour and 45 minutes. They said baby was fine, had a heartbeat, did an ultrasound, everything was fine. She gets home. Within a half hour later, she's bleeding profusely. She rushes back to the hospital, and they would not see her immediately. They told her to wait in line at the ER, and it was going to be a 2 or 2.5 hour wait. So my lady love, who rushed down there, the 5-hour drive down here from Oregon down to Susanville, took her, rushed her to Reno, Nevada, the hospital there, where they saw her immediately and treated her. But by that time, her baby had passed away. The placenta had torn from the uterine wall, and the baby had lost its heartbeat. And my granddaughter was forced to give birth to a stillborn 5-month baby over the Christmas holidays, and it's heartbreaking as hell. And I want to thank everyone who's donated so far. This is so helpful because she's on Medicaid, she's poor, and having to deal with being not being able to fully take care of her kids while she recovers, and having to replace the rental car that she wrecked because she didn't have the full insurance on that. And most of all, to try to secure some sort of justice for the injustice that was done to her by this hospital, this medical negligence, in my opinion, to have let this baby die. Because, folks, if you got into a car wreck and you were taken into the hospital and they treated you for an hour and 45 minutes and they let you go, and then you came back a half hour later bleeding severely, you wouldn't even have to be pregnant. Right? Like, somebody missed something in that sort of situation, and somebody needs to pay. That's the way we feel about this. So we're trying to secure some sort of legal defense, legal help. We've looked at a few different personal injury attorneys, and we are working to make that all happen. We will keep you completely informed here on this podcast, but if you'd like to help us secure some legal representation, help defray the costs of raising kids and replacing cars and all that, the medical expenses, you can find the GoFundMe. It's Justice for Lila Lynn, LYLAHLYNN, Justice for Lila Lynn, and I've got a link to it in the top left corner of my website at radicalruss.com. Well, I was on my way to work yesterday, and I apologize for missing the podcast yesterday, but I had to sleep in. I was really, really tired. Anyway, that's the thing about being a hobbyist podcaster. I make my own hours. But anyway, on my way to work yesterday, I had to stop at the rest stop on I-5 on my way to Grants Pass, Oregon, heading southbound. There's a nice rest area there. And I saw this board. You know how they have the historical reader boards there at rest stops there. all throughout America. And this one was detailing the history of what's called the Rogue Valley here in Southern Oregon that features the Rogue River. And the headline of it is what caught me, because it said, "Cultures clash, treaties fail." I'm like, oh my God, what a fantastic use of the exonerative tense. You know, the exonerative tense whenever they write about an officer-involved shooting? Like, a shooting happened, a gun went off, and there happened to be an officer there. Doesn't tell you who shot who, right? They always trying to exonerate the cops in that situation. Well, here we have exoneration for genocide. Genocidal exoneration. Let me just read the board for you. From about 1850 to 1856, tribal and American cultures fought for their lifeways in what became known as the Rogue River Wars. Skirmishes, ambushes, and murder perpetuated by both sides led to a ceasefire in August 1853 and the Table Rock Treaty meetings. Some 700 Indians from many tribes showed up, as did the military, settlers, and miners. Now, before I get to the next column, perpetuated by both sides? Like, here were all of these tribes living in the Rogue River Valley for millennia, minding their own business. Some white folks show up, some settlers show up, and there was skirmishes, ambushes, and murder perpetuated by both sides. No, I think the skirmishes, ambushes, and murder were begun by the white folks, and then the brown folks retaliated. That's what I think's going on here. But anyway, under the terms of the treaty, the tribes ceded the entire Rogue Valley. In payment, the tribes would receive $60,000 in blankets, clothing, and agricultural implements, and be subject to deductions by settlers who might file depredation claims for loss of property during the war. So you're going to make all the native people give away all the land, this lush river valley in which they had lived and raised their families for generations, in exchange for $60,000 in stuff that can be deducted against if you caused any financial hardship to the settlers that came and stole your land. Wow. Okay. The Table Rock Reservation was temporarily established until a permanent reservation could be selected by the President of the United States. Over the years, 8 treaties were signed in attempts to save Western Oregon tribes from the slaughter being carried out by some immigrants. In the fall of 1855, the act of one man ignited the last stage of the Rogue River Wars. Local politician James Lupton of Jacksonville, Oregon, called a meeting at a local saloon and encouraged, quote, extermination as a solution to the Indian problem, end quote. Gosh, you kind of wonder where Adolf Hitler got all his ideas for a final solution, huh? In movie news, I see a note here that the latest James Cameron blockbuster, Avatar: Fire and Ash, dominated the box office over the Christmas weekend, posting $88 million. The blockbuster's now grossed over $760 million at theaters worldwide. How? Who is going out and watching these Avatar movies? Like, what is this, the third or fourth one? I don't know. I saw the first Avatar movie and went, yeah, all right, that was fun. Like, there's a whole series of them now? Who are the people that are watching these Avatar movies?
Our top story tonight.
Our top story tonight.
Bellissimo Francisco Franco is still dead.
Is still dead.
All right, let's get to our main story, which, of course, as always, is Epstein. And to intro this story, I just want to note a National Enquirer cover that I saw at the grocery store the other day. A face that I haven't seen in a long time. Little blonde girl's face. JonBenet Ramsey. Remember JonBenet Ramsey, the Colorado girl who was mysteriously murdered? Anyway, on the cover of the National Enquirer, after 29 years, Trump will solve JonBenet murder. Trump will solve John Benet Ramsey's murder. Oh, yeah. Sure, right after he solves the Ukraine invasion on day one and lowering prices and creating a perfect healthcare plan, the likes of which you've never seen. Yep, he'll get right on that John Benet Ramsey murder. Yeah, so, of course, this is yet another distraction from the story of this century, the Jeffrey Epstein files. And a latest headline coming out on this is that the Department of Justice has failed to redact the identity of a survivor of Epstein's crimes in a released document per an exclusive comment to Midas Touch. Isn't that the dangest thing? We get these documents released and they're redacted. We got the one that come out 119 pages, all black, all redacted. But whenever there's a slip up, whenever there's an accident, whenever, oops, we just happened to not redact something, it always turns out to be one of the survivors, huh? Notice that? It's never some stray senator or congressman or Supreme Court justice or corporate CEO or big-time political donor or multi-billionaire oligarch or, say, President of the United States that they miss in the redactions. No, it's always some poor young girl who decades ago had her life shattered by Jeffrey Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell, and the perverts that they pimped these girls out to. We need to just keep holding Trump's feet to the fire on this because he's guilty as hell. The only question, I get this from John Fugelsang, but the only question you need to talk to these Trump supporters about is why has Donald Trump's Bureau of Prisons moved a convicted sex offender, Ghislaine Maxwell, to a sweetheart prison? Why? We know why, because she's got the goods on him. This truth is going to come out. It's going to come out. It's going to come out sooner or later. Donald Trump cannot live forever. And once he dies, all sorts of non-disclosure agreements are going to be null and void. All sorts of threats to people's families that might have kept these women from talking will have evaporated. And the truth will come rolling like a stream into our consciousness, and we will find exactly the levels of depravity we've been talking about here. The latest, there was some leak that I heard tale of that came out that Trump was saying to Bondi, we can't release this stuff, it'll hurt my friends. It'll hurt some friends of his. That's the thing here, too, is that for the QAnon people, and you got to give QAnon some credit now, don't we? That they said the deepest levels, highest levels of the government elites were running a global child sex trafficking operation. They were absolutely right. They just got the target wrong in it being the Democrats. It's been Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein and these criminal perverts. And for these MAGA supporters, you know this has just got to be eating away at them. They voted for Donald Trump to be the outsider, the guy who was going to drain the swamp, who is going to stick it to the elites. And even if these folks couldn't find a way to justify, to rationalize all of Donald Trump's connections to Epstein and still be able to say, well, he kicked him out once he knew he was a pervert. He kicked him out of Mar-a-Lago for stealing some of his girls. He really didn't know what's going on. Even if you could grant them that level of delusion, that Trump was Mr. Innocent here, even if you can grant them that, how can they reconcile Trump protecting all the others? That's the problem they're having right now. Even if they can believe that their God King Orange Emperor is innocent in all this, they can't understand why he'd be protecting all the others that are certainly guilty in the Epstein list. So keep the pressure on. This will be his undoing. And to close out the topic, I just have this comment that I didn't have anywhere else to put it, but I think this sums up things pretty well in America these days. Comes from TDOT Open Letter on Blue Sky. T-Dot Open Letter, who writes, America thinks it won the war on terror, but Osama bin Laden couldn't have wished for a more destabilized United States of America. America thinks it won the Cold War, but Russia calls the shots. America thinks it won World War II, but there are white nationalists in the White House. Yeah, I'd go farther. The America thinks it won the Civil War, but the segregationists are running our courts now. A lot of ways we can think of that. Thank you, T-Dot Open Letter.
They don't vote Democrat, they don't drive Cadillacs, and they never use personal vehicles.
The other story that's caught my attention is this renaming of the John F. Kennedy Center. I always say Kennedy Senator. The John F. Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts Memorial Center. We talked about this earlier, how Donald Trump has attached his name to a memorial center. Wishful thinking for all of us. But anyway, this renaming of the Donald J. Trump and the John F. Kennedy Memorial Center for the Performing Arts has angered many people. The first we heard was musician Chuck Red, who plays a regular Christmas Eve concert there at the Kennedy Center, canceled his concert on the basis of them renaming the center after Trump, saying it's a slap in the face to Kennedy and the people that were honoring his memory, namely the American people, Congress, in an act of Congress creating and naming the Kennedy Center. It cannot just be renamed on a whim, like Department of War. So artists are boycotting. We've got a few of them in the list now. Chuck Red, like I mentioned, the Cookers. They were going to be playing a New Year's Eve concert. Christy Lee on January 14th, Doug Verone and the Dancers in April. Others include Issa Rae, Renee Fleming, Shonda Rhimes, Ben Folds, and the entire production of Hamilton, the musical that was to be at the Kennedy Center, has been canceled. And this has drawn a rebuke from Richard Grinnell, the Kennedy Center president, who sent a letter to Chuck Red saying they will seek $1 million in damages for what they're calling a political stunt. Grinnell writes, quote, your decision to withdraw at the last moment, explicitly in response to the center's recent renaming, which honors President Trump's extraordinary efforts to save this national treasure, is classic intolerance. Your action surrenders to the sad bullying tactics employed by certain elements on the left who have sought to intimidate artists into boycotting performances. Yeah, that was it. Yeah. The folks at MS Now got on the phone to Chuck Red and said, listen here, Mr. Chuck Red, you better boycott that performance or we'll have a sternly worded editorial in your direction, Mr. Chuck Red, who most people really don't even know who you are. Come on now. Come on now. Bullying from the left is causing artists to act in a progressive leftist manner. Because, you know, performing artists are so notoriously apolitical. They don't really give a damn about what's happening in society. They have to depend on certain elements of the left to explain to them who needs boycotting. And he continues taking personal jabs at Chuck Red, saying his show wasn't popular. Quote, the contrast between the public's lack of interest in your show with the success we're experiencing under our new chairman is dramatic. The most avant-garde and well-regarded performers in your genre will still perform regularly, and unlike you, they'll do it to sold-out crowds, regardless of their political leanings. Which is also some bullshit, because since the Kennedy Center has been taken over by the MAGA putsch, they have seen a drastic decline. Washington Post reports ticket sales have tanked, quote, nearly 9 months after Trump became chair of the center and more than a month into its main season, ticket sales for the Kennedy Center's 3 largest performance venues are the worst they've been in years, according to a Washington Post analysis of ticketing data from dozens of recent shows as well as past seasons. Tens of thousands of seats have been left empty. So, yeah, you stunk up the joint because, look, the arts are left-leaning. It's just the way it is. You're not going to go into any backstage at a Broadway show and find a whole lot of Republicans. You're not going to survey a whole bunch of musicians and find a whole bunch of MAGA. Sure, you can get your Lee Greenwood and Kiss and Gloria Gaynor and George Strait. There are some right-leaning artists out there, but you're going to find yourself increasingly stuck with country, a whole lot of country, and maybe some bluegrass, and I don't know how much else you're going to find in the world of rock or jazz or blues or soul that's going to want to have their name associated with a Trump Kennedy Center. And furthermore, these threats of lawsuits, that's it, yeah, sue the artist. That'll work. Yeah, let's have artists facing lawsuits and because of the financial and political pressure, give in and perform at the Kennedy Center. Wow, won't those be some stellar performances, huh? And now, the Philharmonic, accompanied by Mr. Zach De La Rocha, will be performing Killing in the Name of. Oh, yeah, that's what you want to do, is you want to try to go up against artists politically. See how that turned out in the civil rights movement when artists like Ray Charles were banning segregated clubs, performances in segregated clubs. Yeah, let's just see how well that works, because, you know, there is a long and storied history of artists doing boycotts for political purposes. The Ain't Gonna Play Sun City back in the 80s when they boycotted South Africa and its apartheid regime. Hell, we go back in the 70s. There were boycotts of performances at the Kennedy Center over the Vietnam War. There were boycotts at the Kennedy Center in the 80s over apartheid in South Africa. There were boycotts for the center's 20th anniversary in the 1990s over lack of diversity and inclusion in the performances. There were boycotts in the 2000s of the Kennedy Center over the handling of the invasion of Iraq and the Iraq War. And for God's sake, the Kennedy Center was created during the Nixon administration. So it's Trump, folks. Yeah, it's all Trump. People have only decided to boycott the Kennedy Center because of Trump, not because of what he represents and the politics he represents. Give me a break.
I got a lot of problems with you people. Now, you're going to hear about it.
Finally, I want to give a shout out to one of my followers out there on Blue Sky who, well, gave me a lesson, educated me, and it was education I needed. It all arose out of a post I saw from somebody named Coinfessions. This was out on X. If you had told me 4 years ago that the NFT I bought with a majority of my life savings would lead me to being homeless, I wouldn't have believed you. Sad story, yeah. Some of these people that were taken in by yet another one of these grifts, the NFTs, that was those JPEGs, those graphic pictures of monkey cartoons that somehow they were collectibles because they were NFTs and had a blockchain and blah, blah, blah. Basically, you were paying money to get a receipt that you owned a JPEG picture that anyone could copy and paste. It was the dumbest grift I'd ever heard of, and boy, I've heard some dumb grifts during the Trumpocene era. But anyway, I feel bad for the guy who's lost his life savings taken in for the grift, and I wrote, The Democratic Party that figures out how to consistently harness the regret of all these people could fulfill my life's dream of seeing a living two-term Democratic president peacefully transferring power to the Democratic president-elect. And I pointed out that that's only happened once in our history. And this takes me back to something I wrote months ago called Seeking 3 Democratic Terms. And it was because I had seen that picture of Biden welcoming Trump into the Oval Office. And I got to thinking to myself, you know, in my lifetime, I've never seen a living Democratic president turn over power to the next Democratic president. It's never happened in my life. Obama got 2 terms, but failed to turn it over to Hillary Clinton. Bill Clinton had 2 terms, but failed to turn it over to Al Gore. Jimmy Carter had 1 term, failed to get a 2nd term. JFK died before he could turn things over to LBJ, and LBJ didn't run for re-election. But on the other side, I can remember that clear as day. Ronald Reagan serving 2 terms, turning the Oval Office over to George H.W. Bush. And that got me to thinking of, when was the last time the Democrats actually strung 3 terms together? Now, that's an easy one to answer. You go back to FDR. FDR served 3 full terms. He was allowed to run for re-election multiple times because we hadn't had the 22nd Amendment yet, right? So he won 3 full terms, was elected to a 4th term, then died in office. Truman served the rest of that term, then ran for re-election. So there was a span where the Democrats held office for 20 years. And look what happened from 1932 to 1952. As far as creating the New Deal, Social Security, all these social safety net programs, plus the programs that got us out of the Depression, the work programs like the Tennessee Valley Authority and the Civilian Conservation Corps. Amazing amount of progress happens when Democrats hold the Oval Office for more than 8 years straight. But even that doesn't really fulfill the thing, because Roosevelt didn't hand over power to Truman when he was alive. He died, right? So it's like it takes a death to get the presidency from one Democrat to the next Democrat. Kennedy to LBJ, Roosevelt to Truman. So I posted this long ago, and in it I went through all the presidential terms, and I noted how while for the Democrats, you have to go all the way back before the Civil War, when Franklin Pierce handed the presidency over to James Buchanan. So that was 1-termer to a 1-termer. And the only time it's happened from a 2-termer to a 1-termer is the very first Democratic president. Andrew Jackson served 2 terms, turned the presidency over to Martin Van Buren. Then I compared and contrasted that to the Republicans. And with the Republicans, you have many instances when they've turned terms over. First of all, the Republicans put 3 terms together when they went from Harding to Coolidge to Hoover. They put 4 terms together when they went from McKinley to Teddy Roosevelt to Taft. And they put 4 terms together when they went from Grant to Hayes to Garfield to Arthur. So there's been 2 instances where the Republicans have had 3 straight terms, and 2 instances where the Republicans have had 4 straight terms. And this is where I get caught by my reader. Because as I pointed out, the Harding, Coolidge, Hoover one doesn't fulfill my request because Harding died in office. My McKinley to Teddy Roosevelt to Taft doesn't work because McKinley died in office. But I had claimed that the Republicans had another instance where a 2-term Republican turned over the White House to the Republican president-elect, and that was when Ulysses S. Grant served 2 terms and then turned the White House over to Hayes. And this is where my reader responds to me and gives me a little lesson. She points out that I was wrong in saying that Grant served 2 terms and turned it over to Republican president-elect, because in that election of 1876, the Republican wasn't the president-elect, the Democrat was. Samuel Tilden won the popular vote and the Electoral College, according to Plantain Jane, I guess, on Blue Sky. Tilden actually won. The Democrat won, but the Republicans threw a hissy fit. They created a special electoral commission, a special electoral commission, and a political deal, the Compromise of 1877. And I had so forgotten about the Compromise of 1877. This is where they sacked Tilden, the Democratic winner, and installed Hayes as president, as a compromise for all sorts of shenanigans that were going back then, having to do with Reconstruction and the South basically wanting to re-enslave black people. So she points out that I was wrong. Grant did not turn over power to a Republican president-elect. He did turn power over to the next Republican to hold the office. So technically, it does not fit my criteria. So you're absolutely right. But here's the problem I got. When she replied to me online, she disabled replies and quote posts. Like, it's okay to correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not mad about that. In fact, I was going to reply right to the lady saying, oh, thank you so much. Because I've been saying this for months now. I want to be correct. Thank you for correcting me, but she wouldn't let me. So I screenshotted it and I posted it on my account at radicalruss.com, and maybe she'll hear the podcast and, hey, accept my apologies. I was wrong and I'm happy to be corrected. But my original point still stands. Republicans have been far better at stringing together multiple terms beyond just 2 terms than the Democrats have. That's my original point. The Democrats have only done it twice. The 12-term span of Jackson to Van Buren, and the 20-year span of FDR through Truman, whereas the Republicans have done it 4 times. Thank you, Nancy, for the correction. I appreciate it. The Radical Russ Show is produced, directed, researched, written, recited, posted, and catered by me, Radical Russ Belville, and governed by Creative Commons share-alike licensing. News, music, video clips, and social media posts are reproduced under fair use copyright laws for commentary and analysis. My main theme is We Love the Herb by Herbal Nation, and interstitial music is by Russ Boom Boom Belville.
What's the boom boom for? Boom boom boom.
Which brings us to our post-credits scene.
Oh, just one more thing, sir. I was thinking...
Well, I'm just getting all caught up on my my saved TV, and so I got to watch that Saturday Night Live episode with Ariana Grande on it, which the whole episode was hilarious. She is a wonderful, wonderful host of the show, and there were a number of sketches there had me laughing out loud. But the one I got a comment on here is they did one of those musical sketches where they were satiring the David Bowie Bing Crosby duet for Christmas, and so the setup was unlikely duets, weird unlikely duets, right? And so they paired all these different folks together with Ariana Grande and, you know, doing these weird singing parts. They got to one where they had, and I forget who he was playing because I was so knocked out I wasn't even in the joke anymore. It was James Austin Johnson, the guy who does Donald Trump for SNL on the cold opens, and does them fantastic. What a great Trump impersonation. But James Austin Johnson and Ariana Grande singing some opera duet, and he went toe-to-toe with Ariana Grande. This dude's got some pipes. Go check out YouTube this last Saturday Night Live episode and catch that skit called Unlikely Duets, I think's the name of the skit. Holy crap, that guy can sing. Woo-wee. What's up with that? Oh, and one other thing. I saw someone commenting about the people on the train or out in public listening to music without their headphones on, that we ought to be able to throw them from the train while it's in motion. And yeah, I get that, but you know, It's not really fair to throw them off the train if we don't also throw off all the phone engineers who thought it was a good idea to get rid of the 1/8 inch phone jack. Oh, get a dongle. Use Bluetooth. Yeah, you lose a dongle, or sometimes your Bluetooth headphones aren't charged up. Right? So put the headphone jacks back in. We all have 1/8 inch headphones laying around somewhere. They don't require being plugged in to charge. You don't lose one of them. They're on a cord. You can find them quite easily. Bring back the headphone jack. Oh, and I lied. One more thing. Pretty disappointed by my Green Bay Packers. Oh my God. Losing at home to the Baltimore Ravens that was so sad. Could not stop the run. Derrick Henry, a man among boys. I'm telling you, the Green Bay Packers' shot at the Super Bowl ended when Micah Parsons tore his ACL. That defense is just not the same without that pressure from Micah Parsons on the passing game. And I was pretty bummed out about it, but then the Cleveland Browns went and beat the Steelers, which means with that Ravens win, they have a chance now in their final game of the season at Pittsburgh to knock Aaron Rodgers out of the playoff bracket on the last game of the season. And the Packers have already sewn up the number 7 seed, so it didn't really hurt them for playoff positioning too much. So I guess that's my silver lining. I get to watch Derrick Henry knock Aaron Rodgers out of the playoffs. Yay! Go Ravens! You can contact me by email at radicalruss@gmail.com. Call my message line at 877-RUSS-420. That's 877-877-420. And reach me on social media on Blue Sky as radicalruss.com and nowhere else. You can support this podcast financially by donating to Radical Russ on Venmo, Rad Russ on Cash App, or via PayPal on my website at radicalruss.com. Get this podcast on Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube, my website, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening, and until next time, take care of each other.
Take it on one more time. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you